I think it's time to change Frank Jr.
Okay, babe. Here. You know what? You look a little tired. Why don't you come and lay down and I'll rub your feet for a little while?
Oh, thanks, baby.
That does it. I'm getting me a white man. Girl,
stop it!
No, just to help around the house a little bit. Now, come on, you know you all were thinking it.
Okay, y'all, so I want to tell y'all about, I went on a date with a white guy, actually outside of my race. I would get from all black men is they're not ready for marriage, they're not ready for nothing serious, they just want situationships, they really don't put in much effort on the romantic side or planning things and stuff like that. Owner of a salon, and I would have some black women come in there and they would be bragging about their husbands, like, oh my God, my husband this, he does this, me and my husband go on trips, we do that. Lying. And then I'm like, oh girl, let me see your husband. And then they show me, I'm like, it's the white guy. So asking each other questions, getting to know each other, and today we went on our first date. And oh my God, y'all, it was a different feel. Like, this guy opened up doors for me. This guy kept telling me how beautiful I was over and over. He loved my smile. He loved my eyes, you know, my skin color and stuff like that.
Black men are having a hard time because they can't compete financially with white men currently because white men out-earn them. Mm-hmm. And they also can't compete in their households because even though currently they are making more than black women, not enough to be considered. The gap in income between a black woman and a black man isn't enough for him to get the label of primary breadwinner for his household. So he's on average. So he's stuck in this place where he feels like he can't compete with the white male because he's making less money. And he also feels like he can't sustain his household because even though he might be making more than his wife, the gap isn't big enough for him to say, I am the primary breadwinner for my family.
You ask, what's the difference between dating some black men and the white man? Well, the white man is going to call you and invite you out. The black man is going to text you, good morning, beautiful, hello, gorgeous, what you doing? The white man is going to take you to a very nice dinner and pay for it. The black man is going to ask you, what you cooking? Can I come over? The white man is going to take you to get your tire fixed and pay for it. The black man is going to tell you, you need to get your tire fixed. The white man is going to buy you a very special gift for your birthday. The black man is going to disappear and call you after your birthday. The white man is going to be very impressed by your education and your personal accomplishments. The black man is going to be intimidated by your education and your personal accomplishments. The white man is going to raise his kid, take care of his kid, spend quality time with his kid. The black man is going to get you pregnant and abandon you and the kid. The white man wants a relationship that leads to marriage and family. The black man wants a situationship that leads to nothing. The white man is going to date you, propose to you, and then marry you. The black man is going to shack up with you and play house with you. The white man is going to be clear in his communication when it comes to you.
What's your favorite thing about black men?
Nothing. Black men suck.
They're
bad. They cheat. They don't care. I'm with the white boys.
What's your favorite thing about black men?
Nothing.
Why is that?
I don't like black men. Not very many meet my standard.
What's your favorite thing about black men?
Nothing. They're just...
The difference I noticed dating white men versus black men. So black men will really gas you up. They give the best compliment. They're going to make you feel like the baddest in the world. White men, to me, tend to treat me more like precious. They're very like soft. They treat you like you're feminine. They really meet you at your feminine energy. I would say, the best way I would say it is that black men treat you like a queen and like their sister or mother, and white men treat you like a princess or a goddess. Now, this is just my experience, obviously.
Chapter 2, the woman of color and the white man. Man is motion toward the world and toward his like. A movement of aggression which leads to enslavement or to conquest. A movement of love, a gift of self, the ultimate stage of what by common accord is called ethical orientation. Every consciousness seems to have the capacity to demonstrate these two components simultaneously or alternatively. The person I love will strengthen me by endorsing my assumption of my manhood, while the need to earn the admiration or the love of others will erect a value market superstructure on my whole vision of the world. In reaching and understanding of phenomena of this sort, the analysts and the phenomenologists are given a difficult task. And if the Sartre has appeared to formulate a description of love as frustration, his being and nothingness, amounting only to an analysis of this honesty and authenticity, the fact remains that true, authentic love wishing for others, what one postulates for oneself, when the postulation unites, the permanent values of human reality entails the mobilization of psychic drives, basically freed of conscious conflicts. Left far, far behind, the last sequel of the titanic struggle carried on against the other have been dissipated. Today, I believe in the possibility of love. This is why I endeavor to trace the imperfections, its imperfections, its perversions. In this chapter devoted to the relations between the woman of color and the European, it is our problem to ascertain to what extent authentic love will remain unattainable before one has purged oneself of that feeling of inferiority or that adoration, exaltation, that overcompensation, which seems to be the indices of the Black Weltanschauung. I messed this word up, but Weltanschauung. I know I messed that word up, pronounced it, but that's how it is, Weltanschauung. For after all, we have a right to be perturbed when we read in Je suis Martinique's, I should have liked to be married, but to a white man. But a woman of color is never altogether respectable in the white man's eyes, even when he loves her. I know that this passage, which serves in a way as the conclusion of a vast delusion as vast delusion prods one brain. One day, a woman named Mayotte, obeying a motivation whose elements of difficult to dissect, sat down to write 202 pages, her life in which the most ridiculous ideas proliferated at random. The enthusiastic reception that greeted this book in certain circles forces us to analyze it. For me, all circulation is impossible. Je suis Martinique is cut-rate merchandise, a sermon in praise of corruption. Mayotte loves a white man to whom she submits in everything. He is her Lord. She asks nothing, demands nothing, except a bit of whiteness in her life. When she tries to determine in her own mind whether a man is handsome or ugly, she writes, all I know is that he had blue eyes, blonde hair, and light skin, and that I loved him. It is not difficult to see that a rearrangement of these elements in their proper hierarchy would produce something in this order. I loved him because he had blue eyes, blonde hair, and light skin. We who come from the Antilles know one thing only too well. Blue eyes, the people say, frighten the Negro. When I observed in my introduction that historically inferiority has been felt economically, it was hardly mistaken. There are evenings, unhappily, when he had to leave me alone in order to fulfill his social obligations. He would go to Dider, the fashionable part of Fort-de-France, inhabited by the Martinique whiteys, who are perhaps not too pure racially, but who are often very rich. It is understood that one is white above the certain financial level, and the France whiteys, most of them government people and military officers. Among Andreas's colleagues, one who, like him, had been marooned in the Antilles by the war, some had managed to have their wives join them. I understood that Andre could not always hold himself aloof from them. I always accepted the fact that I was barred from this society because I was a woman of color, but I could not help being jealous. It was no good his explaining to me that his private life was something that belonged to him alone and that his social and military life was something else, which was not within his control. I nagged so much that one day he took me to Dider. We spent the evening in one of those little villas that I had admired since my childhood, with two officers and their wives. The woman kept watching me with a condensation that I found unbearable. I felt that I was wearing too much makeup that I was not properly dressed, that I was not doing Andre credit, perhaps simply because of the color of my skin. In short, I spent so miserable an evening that I decided that I would never ask again Andre to take me with him. It was Dieter, the preserve of the richest people in Martinique, that magnetized all of the girls' wishes. And she makes the point herself. One is white above a certain financial level. Key point. The houses in this section had long dazzling the lady. I have the feeling, however, that Mayotte is laying it on. She tells us that she did not go to Fort-de-France until she was grown, at about the age of 18, and yet the mansions of Dieter had beguiled her childhood. There is an inconsistency here that becomes understandable when one grasps the background. It is in fact customary in Martinique to dream of a form of salvation that consists of magically turning white. A house in Dieter acceptance into the high society. Dieter is on the hill that dominates the city, and there you have Hegel's subjective certainty made flesh. And in another way, it is quite easy to see the place that the dialectic of being and having would occupy in a description of the behavior. Such, however, is not the case with Mayotte. She is looked at with distaste, things being their usual course. It is because she is a woman of color that she is not accepted by this society. Her resentment feeds on her own artificiality. We shall see why love is beyond the reach of Mayotte of all nations. For the beloved should not allow me to turn my infantile fantasies into reality. On the contrary, he should help me go to beyond them. The childhood of Mayotte shows us a certain number of characteristics that illustrate the line of orientation she follows as an adult. And each time there is a movement or a contact, it will have a direct relation on her goal. It would seem indeed that for her white to be black represent to the two poles of a world, two poles of perpetual conflict, a genuinely Manesian concept of the world. The world has been spoken. It must be remembered, white or black. This is a question. I am white, that is to say that I possess beauty and virtue, which have never been black. I am the color of daylight. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward. Continuing my reading of Frantz Fanon's great book, Black Skin, White Mask. And this is chapter 2, The Woman of Color, the White Man, the Woman of Color and the White Man. And we are getting at, basically we're starting on, we're back in chapter 2, right? Basically chapter 2, The Woman of Color and the White Man. And these next two chapters, Fanon is focusing on interracial relationships, but not just looking at the relationships, but getting to the root of it. Why are black men and black women dating, marrying, and having babies with white people during the era of colonization, during the era of white supremacy, racism? What makes a black woman, we're going to focus on this video today, what makes a black woman want to be with the white man? Is it about love or is it about power? And then next week, we're going to deal with the black man and the white woman, right? Get into the concepts. Is it about love or is it an inferiority complex? But today we're dealing with, is it about love or is it about power? And you can see in the opening clips, you have videos of black women who either have been with white men or fantasize about being with white women. White men like Mayotte, who've always fantasized about being with white men because white men are in a position of power and they crave that power. They want their men to have that power. And not only do white men have that position of power, the resources and the way they interact with the white man is vastly different from the way that they interact with the black man, who they don't see as someone in a position of power. And in this, we're talking about the fantasizing and the longing and the wanting of not only being with the white man, but being accepted by the white man's family and friends have been accepted by white society, but also being able to be seen as white and experienced as white and have the resources and the effects that white people get. Want to move through the world. So the chapter focus is, Fanon is examining the psychology of Black women who seek relationships with white men in colonial societies, right? Getting into analyzing how these relationships are shaped by racism, internalized inferiority, and the desire for social mobility. And that goes back to the clip. And when I pointed out the economic aspect of this, of why some Black women are moving towards white men, the economic and the social mobility to be closer to power. Whiteness is viewed as power. To be closer to whiteness is to be closer to power. So is it about love or is it about power? Is it about internalized inferiority? Is it about that desire for social mobility? I want to move up. I want to be better in life. I want more. And the Black man cannot give this to me. And you heard the women talking about that. They were talking about the Black man that they dealt with, their lack of resources, or their lack of resources in conjunction with a lack of knowing how to treat, like the last lady said, treat them like a goddess. The Black man will treat her like a queen. The white man would treat her like a goddess. So those were her words. So the key points in this chapter that we're going to cover as we're reading is the colonial context shapes desires, right? How does colonization shape the desire of the Black woman? Internalized racism and self-rejection. The illusion of social advancement. The illusion of social advancement. Literary examples, and we're talking about Mayotte. And so Mayotte is our literary example. We're already talking about her. The psychological trade-off, racism and love, and the core problem, right? So those are our key points that we're going to get to. And then, we're going to get to Fanon's main argument in this as well. But love in the colonial era. Now let's look back in America, right? Because we got to tie this to in America. So let me Google this. The first interracial, because it was the first interracial marriage. Okay, so the first interracial marriage in America it says the first interracial marriage in the territory that would become the United States is documented in the union between Luisa de Abrego, a free Black woman, and Miguel Rodriguez, a Spanish man, in St. Augustine, Florida, in 1565. So that was the first. That was the first one that's recorded between a Black woman and a Spanish man in Florida, in St. Augustine, Florida. It would happen here in Florida. But then there's the 1967 decision, the interracial marriage, the Loving versus Virginia. And that was 1967, right? And so interracial couplings is not new to human beings and new to the world. It existed before the system of racism and white supremacy. But now we're examining interracial coupling after the existence, or during the existence of the system of racism and white supremacy, and what is the basis of these relationships, right? Remember, the earliest recorded one was 1565, Luisa de Abrego and Miguel Rodriguez. It says later, and now it's the United States, the marriage of, well, they're talking about Pocahontas and John Smith. I ain't getting into that. But then we're getting into Virginia versus Loving, because that was the legal decision that there was basically a decision that made interracial marriage legal in America. So Mildred Loving, a woman of color, and her white husband, Richard Loving, were sentenced to a year in prison in Virginia for their relationship, but appealed their conviction in the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court bypassed Virginia's state law and ruled that marriage was a constitutional right, and the banning of interracial marriage was a violation of the 14th Amendment, which states that the government must not stand in the way of a citizen's life, liberty, and property unless authorized. And so that was 1967. So the first recorded interracial relationships in the United States were Black women marrying white men. And that man was a Spanish, but that man was a white man. And then the Virginians, right? So Black women marrying white men. And I saw a video yesterday when I was putting this video together of a young lady who was like yelling at the top of her lungs how interracial relationships would not exist in America if it was not for the Loving versus Virginia case. And in a legal sense, she has a point in a legal sense, but not in an overall sense, because remember, white women have always had an eye for Black men. Even on the plantation, white women was going behind their men back and hunching Black men, just like white men were going behind their wives back and hunching, or and both white men and white women were and the Black men and the Black women. But nevertheless, through all of that, there's still a desire of Black, and this focus for this video is still a desire for Black women to be in relationships with white men. Some seek love from white men, some seek power, some seek social advancement, all those different things. But the idea is that the white man overall is a better candidate for the Black woman than the Black man. And so colonial context shapes desire. We're under a system of colonialism, racism, white supremacy. So in colonial societies, whiteness is linked to power, prestige, and civilization, right? Some Black women are conditioned to see relationships with white men as a way to gain social status and escape the limitations placed on them by racism. I don't have to live like this. I can have it all. And in having it all, the white man is going to make sure that he helps to elevate me to the place that she sees where she needs to be, where she's supposed to be in society. Somebody call me. We can't be doing this. So, excuse me. So, but let's get back into this reading. So we're on page 45. It is the first paragraph on page 45. So remember to hit that like button, comment, share, subscribe. I know I'm late in the video, but hit that like button, comment, share, subscribe, and make sure we're getting in, because France for None be going in. So let me turn this ringer off real quick. Then we're going to go ahead and get it in. I am Black. I am the incarnation of a complete fusion with the world, an intuitive understanding of the earth, an abandonment of my ego in the heart of the cosmos. And no white man, no matter how intelligent he may be, can never understand Louis Armstrong and the music of the Congo. If I am Black, it is not the result of a curse, but it is because, having offered my skin, I have been able to absorb all the cosmic effluvia. I am truly a ray of sunlight under the earth. And there lies one body to body with one's Blackness or one's whiteness in full narcissistic cry, each sealed into his own peculiarly with it is true now that then a flash or so, but these are threatened at the source. From the first is how the problem appears to Mayotte at the 5th year of her age in the 3rd page of her book. She took her inkwell out of the desk and emptied it over his head. This was her way of turning whites into Blacks. But she quite soon recognized the futility of such attempts. And then there were Louise and her mother. Louise and her mother, who told her that life was difficult for a woman of color. So since she could no longer try to blacken, to nigrify the world, she was going to try in her own body and in her own mind to bleach it, or to start, she would become a laundress. I charged high prices, higher than elsewhere, but I worked better And since people in Fort-de-France like their linens clean, they came to me. In this end, they were proud to have their laundry done by Mayotte. And this was the beginning of her trying to fit into the white society, seeking the power and acceptance of the white society. I can't turn them black. I can't make them become me. So I'm going to become them. I'm sorry that Mayotte had told us nothing about her dreams. That would have made it easier to reach her unconscious. Instead of recognizing her absolute blackness, she proceeds to turn into an accident. She learns that her grandmother was white. I found that I was proud of it. It was certainly not the only one who had white blood, but a white grandmother was not so ordinary as a white grandfather. So my mother then, since he is the master, since he is the master and more simply the male, the white man can allow himself the luxury of sleeping with many women. This is true in every country and especially the colonies. But when a white woman accepts a black man, there's automatically a romantic aspect. It is a giving, not a seizing. In the colonies, in fact, even though there's little marriage or actual sustained cohabitation between whites and blacks, the numbers of hybrids is amazing. This is because the white men often sleep with their dark black servants. Nonetheless, that does not provide any foundation for this passage from Manoni. Thus, one part of our drives will quite naturally impel us toward the most alien types. That is no mere literary illusion. There is no question of literature. And the illusion was probably very slight with Galileo's soldiers chose young Romantoa as their more and less temporary wives. In fact, these first contacts presented no difficulties at all. It was in part due to the healthy sex life of the Malagasys, which was unmarried by complexities. But this only goes to show that racial conflicts develop gradually and do not arise spontaneously. And that's an excerpt from a book, ProfCTJ and Caliban, on page 112. Let us not exaggerate. When the soldier of the conquering army went to bed with a young Malagasy girl, there was undoubtedly no tendency on his part to respect her entity as another person. The racial conflicts do not come later. They coexisted. The fact that Algerian colonists go to bed with their 14-year-old housemaids in no way demonstrates the lack of racial conflicts in Algeria. No, the problem is more complicated, and Mayotte is right. It is an honor to be a daughter of a white man. That proves that one was not made in the bushes. This expression is applied exclusively to all illegitimate children of the upper class, and was a mixture. I should have guessed it when I looked at her light color. I found her prettier than ever and clever and more refined. If she has married a white man, do you suppose I should have been completely white? And life may not have been so hard for me. I daydreamed about this grandmother who I had never known and who had died because she had loved a colored man of Martinique. How could a Canadian woman have loved a man of Martinique? I could have never stopped thinking of our priest. And I made up in my mind that I could never love anyone but a white man, a blue-eyed blonde, a Frenchman. And that was these are the ideas and concepts of Mayotte, but also Frantz Fanon is the excerpt from Prospero and Caliban is getting into the two things that's happening here. Getting into the psyche of the white man and getting into the psyche of the black woman, or the expectations and the beliefs of the black woman toward the white man. And the white man is only seeing her as something to be used, something to have relations with, something to lay down with, maybe make a baby, but I ain't gonna stick around and take care of the baby. So they were just tools to be used, right? And so this is when we get into the internalized racism and self-rejection of Black people throughout the diaspora, right? Fanon argues that some women of color in colonized settings internalize the idea that Blackness is inferior, and that's what Mayotte has done. Because Mayotte is saying, yes, I have white in my blood. My grandmother is white. I got some white in me, but if I was all white, life would be better. I will have more power. I have more social mobility. I will have more love. Everything would be better. And she would have access to the best white men, and white men wouldn't just have to use her, right? And she could truly be loved by the white man, right? They may reject their own black identity and idealize whiteness. What Mayotte is doing, she is rejecting her blackness, right? Because her white grandmother and those blonde-haired, blue-eyed Frenchmen, she want one so bad, right? This manifests in the preference for white partners as a means to symbolically become white. And she could fully become white. Her mind would become white. Her spirit would become white. Her thoughts would become white. Her soul would become white. Her essence would become white. Everything about whiteness would be there for her, right? And then it also leads to her illusion of social advancement. We're going to come back to that, right? We are thus put on notice that what Mayotte wants is a kind of lactification. For in the world, the race must be whitened. And every woman in Martinique knows this, says and repeats it. When the race, save the race. Whiten the race, save the race, right? And we know that's big in the Caribbean. Whiten the race, save the race, but not in the sense that one might think, not preserve the uniqueness of that part of the world in which they grew up, but make sure that it will be white. Every time I have made up my mind to analyze certain kinds of behavior, I have been unable to avoid consideration of certain nauseating phenomena. The number of sayings, proverbs, petty rules of conduct that govern the choice of a lover in the Antilles is astounding. It is always essential to avoid falling back into the pit of niggerhood. And every woman in the Antilles, whether in a casual flirtation or a serious affair, is determined to select the least black of the men. Sometimes, in order to justify a bad investment, she is compelled to resort to such arguments as, this X is black, but misery is blacker. I know a great number of girls from Martinique, students in France, who admit to me with complete candor, completely white candor, that they would find it impossible to marry black men. Get out of that and then deliberately go back to it. Thank you, no, right? Yeah. So besides, they added, it is not that they deny that blackness have any, Besides, they added, it is not that we deny that blacks have any good qualities, but it is so much better to be white. I was talking only recently to one such woman. Breathless with anger, she stormed at me. If Cesar makes so much display about accepting his race, it is because he really feels it is a curse. Do the whites boast like that about theirs? Every one of us has a white potential, but some try to ignore it and others simply reverse it. As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't marry a Negro for anything in the world. Such attitudes are not rare, and I must confess that they disturb me. In a few years, this young woman will have finished her examinations and gone off to teach in some school in the Antilles. It is not hard to guess what will come of that. An enormous task confronts the Antillian who has begun by carefully examining the objectivity of the various prejudices prevailing in his environment. When I began this book, having completed my medical studies, I thought of presenting it as my thesis. But dialectic required the consistent adaptation of positions. Although I had more or less concentrated on the psychic alienation of the black man, I could not remain silent about certain things which, however psychological they may be, produce consequences that extended to the domains of other sciences. Every experience, especially if it turns out to be sterile, has to become a component of reality and thus play a part in the restructuring of reality. It's to say that the patriarchal European family, with its flaws, its failures, its vices, closely linked to the society that we know produces about 30% neurotics. The problem is to create, with the help of psychoanalytical, sociological, political lessons, a new family environment capable of reducing, if not eliminating, the proportion of waste in the asocial sense of the world, right? In other words, the question is whether basic personality is consistent or variable. All these frantic women of color in quest of white men are waiting. In one of those days, surely they will be surprised to find that they do not want to go back. They will dream of a wonderful night, a wonderful lover, a white man, possibly two. They will become aware one day that white men do not marry black women, but they have consented to run this risk. What they must have is whiteness at any price. I'm gonna read that. But they have consented to run this risk. What they must have is whiteness at any price. For what reason? Nothing could be simpler. Here is a story that suits their minds. One day, St. Peter saw three men arrive at the gate of heaven, a white man, a mulatto, and a Negro. What do you want most? He asked the white man. Money. Are you? And you? He asked the mulatto. Fame. St. Peter then turned to the Negro and said with a wide smile, I'm just carrying these gentlemen's bags. So, you know, that's the mindset of where they see black men at, right? So this gets to the illusion of social advancement for some black women who seek the white proximity, the white powers, who seek the assimilation into white culture. Marriage or romance with a white man is often seen as entry into the dominant class. I have access to white power now because I'm a part of this white man's family. Even though the whole family may reject me, I still have access to white power, more access than the rest of you other Negroes. So therefore, that woman feels like she's in a better position than the rest of the other Negroes because of her access to white power. So Frantz Fanon is saying that, nah, lady, I know you feel like just because you married a white man that you got access to white power, but this is all an illusion of power, an illusion of access, an illusion of inclusion, right? Racial prejudice and structural inequality persist even in intimate relationships. So seen plenty of videos, have seen plenty of videos. You can go on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and hear stories of black women talking about being married to white men who are still racist, have children with white men who are still racist, who still espouse racist rhetoric, who still do racist things in front of them and their family, whose family still treat them like they're nothing, whose family still have not accepted them. So yes, that white man may be dealing with you, but he is not free from his ideologies, and you are just whatever he's using at the time, right? And so when we're looking at the example, the literary example, we're looking at Mayotte, right? So Fanon analyzes the autobiographical novel Je suis Martinique by Mayotte, a mixed race woman from Martinique who openly declares her preference for white men. And we've read that, right? In her story, love for a white man is presented as pure admiration for his whiteness, not just his personal qualities, right? But we know that's not the truth, because the personal qualities is what gives his whiteness value. Remember that. Fanon critiques Mayotte for accepting colonial myths and degrading her own racial identity, right? Blackness is not second rate to whiteness or any other race or any other ethnicity or nationality or culture. We have to learn to love who we are. But I understand being under colonial rule, being under racism, white supremacy, the dominant society, the dominant ideas, the dominant narratives, the standards of beauty, the standards of power, the standards of structure, the standards of success is all white. And so after a while, the Negroes get tired of just being in a subservient position, and everybody want to be on top. And in this case, the black women have figured out that, or the black women believe, have the illusion that if I get with a white man, then that will put me closer to the top, because you weak black men cannot get me to where I need to be in this society. The smile of a black man, the grin in English in the original, seems to have captured the interest of a number of writers. Here is what Bernard Wolfe says about it. It pleases us to portray the Negro showing us all his teeth and the smile made for us. And the smile, as we see it, as we make it, always means a gift. Gifts without ends in every advertisement, on every screen, on every food product label. The black man's gives Madame the new dark Creole colors for her pure nylons, courtesy of the house of Vigne. Her imaginative coil-like bottles of Gilliwong toilet water and perfume. Shoe shines, clothes white as snow, comfortable lower berths, quick baggage handling, jazz, jitterbug, jives, jokes, and the wonderful stories of Burr Rabbit to amuse the little children. Service with a smile every time. The Blacks' Rights anthropologist Jeffrey Grower in The American Spirit, a study of national something. Not long ago, Attainable described one of the disillusionments. I was stupefied as an adolescent when a girl who knew me quite well jumped up in anger because I said to her in a situation where the word was not only appropriate, but one word that suited the occasion. You as a negress, me a negress. Can't you see I'm practically white? I despise Negroes. Niggers stink. They're dirty and lazy. Don't ever mention niggers to me. I knew another black girl who kept a list of partisan dance halls where there was no chance of running into niggers. We must see whether it is possible for the black man to overcome his feelings of insignificance, to rid his life of the compulsive quality that makes it so like the behavior of the Pohibio. Affect is exacerbated in the Negro. He is full of rage because he feels small. He suffers from an inadequacy in all human communication. And all of these factors chain him with an unbearable insultarity. Describing the phenomena of ego withdrawal, Anna Freud writes, as a method of avoiding pain, ego restriction, like the various forms of denial, does not come under the heading of psychology, of neurosis, but is a normal stage in the development of the ego. When the ego is young and plastic, its withdrawal from one field of activity is sometimes compensated for by excellence in another, upon which it concentrates. But when it has become rigid or has already acquired an intolerance for pain, and so it obsessively fixated on a method of flight, such withdrawal is punished by impaired development. By abandoning one's position after another, it becomes one-sided, loses too many interests, and can show but a meager achievement. We understand now why the black man cannot take pleasure in insultarity. For him, there is only one way out. It leads into the white world, whence his constant preoccupation with attracting the attention of the white man, his concern with being powerful like the white man, his determined effort to acquire protective qualities, that is, the proportion of being or having that enters into the compensation of an ego. As I said earlier, it is from within that the Negro will seek admittance to the white sanctuary. The attitude derives from the intention. Ego withdrawal is a successful defense mechanism. It is impossible for the Negro, it is impossible for the Negro. He requires white approval. In the midst of her mystical euphoria and her rhapsodic fantasies, it seems to Mayotte that she is an angel and that she soars away all pink and white. Nevertheless, in the film Green Pastures, God and the angels are black, but the film was a brutal shock to our author. How is it possible to imagine God with Negro characteristics? It is not my vision of paradise, but after all, it was just an American film. Indeed, no, the good and merciful God cannot be black. He is a white man with bright pink cheeks. From black to white is the curse of mutation. One is white, and one is rich. One is beautiful and one is intelligent. Meanwhile, Andre has departed to carry the white message to other Mayottes under the skies. Delightful little jeans with blue eyes, bicycling the whole length of chromosome corridor. But as a good white man, he has left instructions behind him. He is speaking of his Mayotte and Mayotte's child. You will bring him up. You will tell him about me. You will say, he was a superior person. You must work hard to be worthy of him. What about dignity? He had no need now to achieve it. It was injected now into the labyrinth of his arteries, entrenched into his little pink fingernails, a solidity rooted with dignity. And what about the father? This is what Intembles has to say about him. A fine specimen of his kind, he talked about the family worked the nation, our good Pitane, and our good God, all of which allowed him to make her pregnant according to form. God has made use of us, said the handsome swine, the handsome white man, the handsome officer, after which under the same God-fearing Pitanist properties, I shove her over the next man. Before we have finished with her, whose white lord is like one dead, and who surrounds herself with dead men in a book crowded with deplorably dead things, we feel that we should like to ask Africa to send us a special envoy. That's wild. So, because it's like even if I'm just a carrier of the white man's seed, it's all good because it put them closer to whiteness, closer to power, closer to acceptance. And then she's carrying the seed of the white man, and he's not going to stick around to help raise the baby. He's not going to stick around to make sure she's good. But being a deadbeat father, but hey, remember, tell him that I was superior to you, though. Remember that he should understand the whiteness in him is greater than the blackness in him, and make sure that he works hard to one day be in my presence as a real white man. Because, you know, I just have fun with y'all black ladies, and I get y'all pregnant time to time. You know, hey, Mayotte, it was good, but I'm finna go find my next Mayotte. Peace out, baby. And remember, if you do have a son or a daughter, tell them that I was greater than you, and you had the privilege of being in my presence and carrying my seed. Because, you know, you want to be next to the white man anyway. So the psychological trade-off, right? The women of color who chooses whiteness over her own culture gains certain privileges, but pays the price in alienation from her community and herself. She's battling with herself, that dichotomy, right? She lives in a fantasy of racial assimilation that can never fully be realized because they will never fully accept you into their society or their family's black girl. Little black lady, little black girl. You have to realize that they see you as no more than something that they can use for copulation. They can use for reproduction. Don't even have to stick around for it. Nor are we kept waiting. Abuyele Saji and Nini offers a description of how black men can behave in contact with Europeans. I've said that Negrophobes exist. It is not hatred of the Negro, however, that motivates them. They lack the courage for that, or that they have lost it. Hate is not inborn. It has to be constantly cultivated and brought into being in conflict with more or less recognized guilt complexities. Hate demands existence, and he who hates has to show his hate in an appropriate actions and behavior. In a sense, he has to become hate. That is why the American have substituted discrimination for lynching, each to his own side of the street. Therefore, we're not surprised that in the cities of France, Black Africa, there are European quarters. Monyour's work, L'Éveil d'Afrique Noire, had already attracted my interest, but I was impatiently awaiting an African voice. Thanks to Al-Noon Diop's magazine, I have been able to coordinate the psychological motivations that govern men of color. There is wonder in the most religious sense of the word. It is only white man, M. Campaign is the only white man in St. Louis, who goes regularly in the St. Louis Club, a man of a certain social standing, for he is an engineer with the Department of Bridges and Highways as well as a deputy director of public works in Senegal. He is said to be very much of a Negrophile, while much more so than M. Rodding, who teaches at the Lycée Faidherbe and who gives a lecture on the equality of the races at the St. Louis Club itself. The good character of the one or the other is a constant theme for vehement discussions. In any event, M. Campaign goes to the club more often, and there he has made the acquaintance of a well-behaved And there he has made the acquaintance of the very well-behaved natives who show him much deference, who like him, who feel honored by his presence among them. The author, who is a teacher in Black Africa, feels obligated by M. Rodding for his lecture on racial equality. I call this an outrage. One can understand the complaints that Monier heard from the young Africans whom he had occasion to meet. What we need here are Europeans like you. One is constantly aware that for the Black man, encountering the Taubab with understanding offers a new hope of harmony. Analyzing various passages of Adeboyele Sajid's story, I shall attempt to grasp the living reactions of the woman of color to the European. First of all, there are two such women, the Negress and the mulatto. The first has only one possibility and one concern, to turn white. The second wants not only to turn white, but also to avoid slipping back. What indeed could be more illogical than a mulatto woman's acceptance of a Negro husband? For it must be understood once and for all that it is a question of saving the race. And remember, we hear Caribbeans, Hispanics, Latinos, Latinos in the Caribbean also always talking about lightening the race or saving the race, right? Hence Nene's great problem. A Negro has had the gall to go as far as to ask to marry him. A Negro had the gall to write her. The love that I offer you is pure and strong. It has nothing of a false tenderness, indeed, to love you with lies and illusions. I want to see you happy, completely happy in a setting to frame your qualities, which I believe I know how to appreciate. I should consider it the highest of honors and the greatest of joys to have you in my house and to dedicate myself to you, body and soul. Your grace would illuminate my home and radiate light to the darkest corners. Furthermore, I consider you too civilized and refined to respect brutally the offer of a devoted love concerned only with reassure your happiness. And that's a Black person to a white person. And, you know, the family and everybody shutting that down. No, you are a Negro and you do not have access to this whiteness, right? This final sentence should not surprise us. Normally, the mulatto woman should refuse the presumptuous Negro without mercy. But since she is civilized, she will not allow herself to see her lover's color so that she can concentrate her attention on his devotion. Describing Maktar Adeboye Sajid writes, an idealist and a convinced advocate of unlimited progress, he still believed in the good faith of men and their honesty, and that he readily assumed that in everything merit alone must triumph. Who is Maktar? He has passed his baccalaureate. He is an accountant in the Department of Rivers, and he is pursuing a perfectly stupid little stenographer who has, however, the least disputable quality. She is almost white, therefore one must apologize for taking the liberty of sending her a letter. The utmost insolence, perhaps first, that any Negro had dared to attempt. One must apologize for daring to offer Black love to a white soul. This we encounter again in Renee Moran. The fear, the timorousness, the humility of the Black man in his relations with the white woman, or in any case with a woman whiter than he. Just as Mayotte tolerates anything from her lord Andre, Maktar makes himself the slave of Nene, the mulatto, prepared to sell his soul. But what is waiting for this boy is the law of the law of pleading bar. The mulatto considers his letter an insult, an outrage to her honor as a white lady. The Negro is an idiot, a scoundrel, an ignoramus who needs a lesson. The lesson she is prepared to give him She will teach him to be more courteous and less brazen. She will make him understand that white skins are not for the wretched, right? White skins are not for the Negroes, for the bottom feeders. Having learned the circumstances, the whole mulatto society plays a chorus in her wrath. There's talk of taking the matter to court or having the black man brought up on criminal charges. There will be letters to the head of the Department of Public Works, to the governor of the colony, to call their attention to the black man's behavior and have him dismissed in recompense for the moral havoc that he has inflicted. Such an offense against principle should be punished by castration, and ultimately a request made that Mektar be formally reprimanded by the police. For if he returns to his unhealthy follies, we will have him brought into line by the police inspector Drew, whose colleagues have nicknamed him the real bad white man. We have seen here how a girl of color reacts to a declaration of love made by one of her own. Let us inquire now what happens in the case of a white man. Once more, we resort to Saji, the long passage that he devotes to her reactions produced by the marriage of a white man, and a mulatto will provide the vehicle. So this is the long passage. For some time, a rumor had been repeated all over St. Louis. It was at first a little whisper that went from one to another, making the wrinkled faces of old Singaras glow, putting new light into their dull eyes. Then the younger woman, showing the whites of their eyes and forming their heavy lips into circles, shouted the news, which caused amazement everywhere. Oh, it can't be. How do you know it's true? Can such things happen? It's sweet. It's such a scream. The news that had been running through St. Louis for a month was delightful, more delightful than all the promises in the world. It crowned a certain dream of grandeur, of distinction, which was common to all mulatto women. The ninnies, the nanas, and the ninettes live wholly outside the natural conditions of their country. A great dream haunts every one of them, is to be the bride of a white man in Europe. One could say that all their efforts are directed to this end, which is almost never attained. Their need to gesticulate, their love for ridiculous ostentation, their calculated, theatrical, revolting attitudes are just so many effects of the same mania for grandeur. They must have white men completely white and nothing else will do. Almost all of them spend their entire lives waiting for a stroke of luck, which is anything but likely. And they are still waiting when old age overtakes them and forces them deep into the dark refuges where their dream finally grows into a haughty resignation. Very delightful news. M. Derive, a completely white European employed in the civil service, has formally requested the hand of Didi, a mulatto who was only half Negro. It was unbelievable. And I'm going to stop my reading right there, right? And so stop there, but I'm also go forward and continue the analysis of the chapter, right? Because now we're getting into racism and love, right? And I stop, and remember this chapter goes from 41 to 62. Yeah, so yes, from 41 to 62. All right, so racism and love, right? White men are in relationships with black women, married to black women, having babies with black women, but still harbor racist ideologies, feelings, mindsets, and actions, right? Fanon points out that relationships across racial lines in colonial systems are rarely free from the power dynamics of race. Because remember, some of these black women, or even all of these black women, are getting with white men because they want that power. Even if affection is genuine, colonial hierarchies and stereotypes influence how partners see each other. On one hand could be a fetish, and on the other hand, a search for power. So it's like they both are using each other, and it's not genuine because they both have a means to an end, right? And so Fanon gets to the core problem, right? The issue is not interracial love itself, but the motivation behind it when it is rooted in colonial brainwashing, right? When a woman's attraction to a white man comes from seeing him as superior because of his race, it reinforces the very system that devalues her. The system of white supremacy is reinforced when a black woman is wanting or desiring a white man because of his whiteness. Some women of color in colonial societies are drawn to white men because they have been conditioned to believe whiteness equals superiority. Their relationships are often rooted in a desire for social climbing and racial assimilation rather than in equality for genuine connection, leaving the woman alienated in her own identity. While she has the idea of she's chasing love, but there's an underlining piece there that she understands why she wants the white man. It's more than love. It's about power assimilation. Whiteness is the key. Whiteness is the goal. This is the best way that she will get her access to whiteness. So this is chapter 2, the woman of color and the white man, right? And so remember, chapter 3, we're going to pick up on chapter 3 next video, next week. But is this about love or is it about power? And we can already conclude that it's about power. It's about power. It's not just about love. It's about the access that the white man has, the resources the white man has. And women love power. So this page 41, like I said, page 41 to, let's scroll down. 41 to 60, 41 to 62. So page 41 to 62. And so for the next video, we're picking up on page 63, chapter 3, page 63, the man of color and the white woman. And it goes from 63 to from 63 to what? 63 to what? What we got? 63 to 82. From pages 63 to 82 is chapter 3, the man of color and the white woman. All right. So you already know we're getting it in. Every Monday, make sure you tune in 1 p.m. Hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share. Let everybody know what we got going on over here on the Shoulders of Giants. We can't stop, won't stop. We're going to keep dropping this heat, keep dropping this information. Thank you to everybody. Hold on. Let me give a couple shout outs, man. Definitely got to give a shout out to Me Kim. Thank you, Me Kim, for your continued support. Who else? Give my shout outs. I want to give a shout out also to Cheryl Tate. You are greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated to Cheryl Tate. Of course, like I say, Me Kim, Cheryl Tate, Michael Anthony Clark Jr., everybody who continues to support on the Shoulders of Giants. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're just going to continue doing what we're doing and moving forward and making this thing happen. But remember, we're reading these books to learn the information, understand it, and apply it to ourselves to make our Black lives better. We're not just reading just to say we read. We're reading to understand, to apply. All right. Love y'all. Catch y'all on the other side.